All right. As folks arrive, feel free to put your name in the chat and where you're tuning in from. It's so great to see everybody coming in. I'm going to run through some invitations for this evening. So these are some community agreements that Inner Strength has uses in a lot of our classes and workshops. Share only what you have permission to share, as this will become an interactive discussion later in the evening, so be thinking mindfully about what you're sharing and asking. Practice curious and caring listening. Aim to grow. Consciously be aware of your body, emotions, and intentions. So definitely listen to whatever you need during this webinar, and engage with respectful and kind language. All right, and then a few other ones. Resist the impulse to multitask. We're going to be together here for about 90 minutes, and there will be a break in the middle. So give yourself a break. You're here, we're all here together to have a really engaging conversation. And that being said, one thing that might help is putting your phone away. We invite you to be curious and to inquire. So we're going to be in a process of inquiry this evening, and we're inviting you to allow yourself to really be interested in open-ended questions and to bring your curiosity for the Q&A portion. All right, stop my share. Okay. Finding my mouse here. All right. So my name is Madison Wagner. I'm a member of the Inner Strength team and will be your moderator for tonight's event. I am so thrilled to welcome you all to this first donors only event to kick off our Giving Tuesday campaign. It feels really special to be in a room with all of the supporters of Inner Strength over the years. Because of your collective vision and enthusiasm, we have become the gold standard of school mindfulness and systems thinking programs. Our instructors this fall have been sharing with us how their students are having amazing and transformative insights, and the classes that your donations make possible are catalyzing a new cohort of instructors and regular school teachers who all believe that whole person wellness should be the foundation for learning. We have a really big mission here at Inner Strength, and it could not be flowering at a better time. So I'm really excited to see you all here. And I'm going to take a moment to introduce our two guest speakers for the evening. So Tony Holland brings his depth of technology and large systems expertise as VP of SAP Partner Sales Channels. He's an executive MBA graduate of Villanova School of Business and recipient of their prestigious Bartley Medallion. He invests a lot of time as a mentor and coach and was a semi-finalist in the XPrize competition, which is a $1.5 million competition for innovation in technology. One of his peers describes Tony as a strategic thinker with an ability to connect a vision for the future to the business realities of today. We're so lucky Tony joined Inner Strength's board earlier this year and has been an incredible asset in thinking about strategy and leadership development as we continue to grow. So welcome, Tony. And speaking with Tony tonight is Amy Edelstein, the Executive Director and founder of Inner Strength. I'm guessing many of you know Amy fairly well, so I'll try to keep her very prolific set of experiences and accomplishments short. Amy is an educator, author, and public speaker. She has over 40 years working with contemplative tools and development philosophy. She is a recipient of the 2019 Philadelphia Social Innovation Award and co-founder of Emergence Education Press, which is a publishing house that produces transformational books and programs for adults. Amy has authored now 6 books, the most recent of which, Adventure of Sand Scar, will be out November 20th in 11 days. I hope she doesn't mind if I plug it a little, but her account details her journey as a 21-year-old into the remote high altitude Zanskar Valley Desert and provides a really unique window into the beauty and wisdom of Buddhist culture. So be sure to look out for that. And it's so great to have both of you here in conversation. Just a couple words on how tonight is going to work. So Amy and Tony are going to co-interview each other. They both have very inquiring minds, and they decided they wanted to ask each other questions. The conversation will range, as inquiry often does, starting with technology and the promise for youth empowerment, and thinking through the fulfillment of youth's higher potentials. We're going to take a short body break in about an hour to stretch and hydrate, and we'll also be showing you some fun slides. And then after the break, Tony and Amy will take your questions. So you can post your questions anytime using the Q&A tool, or just throw them in the chat. If you do use the chat, make sure you put a capital Q in front of your question so I can find it quickly. All right, I think that's enough housekeeping. Amy, would you like to start us off with a question for Tony?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madison. And welcome everyone to, just before we start, just to highlight what Madison was saying, to thank you all for your support over the years. It's really made a huge difference to us in Inner Strength. You've literally made it possible for us to work with over 15,000 students to date, and we're reaching students in 70 classrooms a week this year. So have no doubt that your support, your enthusiasm, your financial gifts definitely make this possible. But tonight we're going to start at least talking about the world of futuristic technology. So Peter Diamandi's XPrize, I have followed for I don't know how many years. It's been that, for me, that sense of, oh my God, that's where new worlds happen. And Tony, you were a semifinalist, so you got to be there up close and personal with the 30 semifinalists. Can you tell me a little bit about, first of all, about what your innovation was, your invention, and also what you're hoping to accomplish? Many of our donors may not be familiar with the XPrize or the kind of things that people invent. So can you open up that world for us?
Oh, sure. And thank you for having me, Amy. The Avatar XPrize is one where it's 4-year type of global competition, and it was focusing on developing an avatar system that could deploy, human senses and actions and presence to a remote location in real time. So you may not all be familiar with that technology, but the movie Avatar sort of modeled the future thinking, where people could be remote in another world, and yet it would be so real that it would be like we are right now, present together.
So you're saying that I could beam into Iceland and respond to a sick bird there? How? Can you explain that?
It's amazing that the technology exists now for that type of science fiction, futuristic thinking to finally happen. And so that's really, we're at the beginning of this movement. But all the Lego building blocks of the technology, they already exist, from artificial intelligence to sensors to virtual worlds and robotics that can be remotely controlled. And so the XPrize contest really was, sponsored by ANA Airlines for $10 million for teams really to come together and innovate. And those innovations were not just demonstrations that, yes, it's possible, but it was the building of a community. So it's exciting to be at the beginning, almost the birth of a new age of possibilities, and to explore what the impact can be. So there were 15 finalist teams from 8 countries, and they're still competing to create this system. But the possibilities of this, Amy, are just exciting. Could you imagine now that you could experience your presence and care for anyone instantly, regardless of the distance? So think of disaster relief, or think about Philadelphia and bringing the greatest minds around the world to the inner city school systems and be as present as you are with me right now.
So is there a physical robot? I'm sorry. Is there a physical robot that goes first and then it gets embodied with, like we have video technology now and we're talking, but it would be like or is it a hologram? Is it light? What would it look like?
So did you see the movie? If in the movie, you actually put your body into sort of a suit. And when you put your body in this suit or this body encasement, you then woke up or found yourself walking around inside of a real world. But it was you with the same expressions and emotions and empathy, but you're experiencing another world with other people. And so what was created during the contest were all these teams, including our team, where you created basically gloves that you could put on, and this sort of bodysuit controlled the robot. And the robot was in a different room on a different floor of the building. And that robot basically had a screen that allowed you to see my expressions. So the remote operator could be smiling, could be tilting their head left or right and squinting their eyes, and you would feel and see all of those expressions. And at the same time, the robot is in the room with you, almost like the movie I, Robot, but it's being controlled by me because I have this suit on. And the robot has sensors too, so spatial sensors. So it knows how to pick up a glass of water and not squeeze the bottle too hot, difficult in a way that it might damage a plastic bottle. So it has touch and it has feel. And so then the robot basically played games with the judges. And so the judges might play a game of chess with the robot. And I'm in the other room somewhere remotely, and I play chess with the person on the other side of that table who is judging just how real is this presence. And of course I could see, just like I can see you as you're nodding your head, I could see that person's expressions and they could see mine, so they know if I'm perplexed or if I'm happy or I'm sad. And so it was the conveying of a real human experience with empathy and touch, but operated remotely by a person. And all the teams were able to demonstrate that using different types of technology, all trying to show that this can be done today.
So the implications are phenomenal if you think about humanitarian missions in earthquake areas, disaster relief,
Yes.
Simple surgeries, even cataract operations, that there's a level of, or mediation, walking into the middle of a heated argument between two gangs in Philadelphia and being able to be there without being in harm's way and cool things down.
Yes. Or mentoring when school hours are over, but you can continue to be right there in the home, mentoring and interacting with the student, and the robot learns. So the robot actually can begin to do things that maybe it would take time for you to teach other teachers to be as good as you are in that mentoring process.
Interesting. But can the robot meditate?
Why not? It's a person, right? So it's actually another person operating this robot, but they're able to sort of transport their presence in a very personable way without being there.
So you think about the way teens are struggling with a lot of sleep issues, a lot of self-harm issues, a lot of depression anyway, but because of the pandemic, it's just kind of screwed things up in their normal patterns and social interactions. So when they need that kind of companionship, obviously an adult is not going to beam into their house, but if this were, once this becomes more commonplace, you could see that you could actually minister and tend to teens where they are when they need it in ways that you can't really access at the moment. I mean, it's wild to think about.
It's exciting. And if it's what it attracted me to inner strength, because if I think about really the top social problems that teens are struggling with every day, it's things like depression or bullying, drug use or alcohol use or obesity and academic problems and peer pressure and social media, or violence. All of these things, I think inner strength is already addressing, but now to be able to continue that 24/7 and just bring that presence right into the home is exciting.
That's really exciting. Our baby step is with the Inner Strength Vibe, which is our mobile app, which is a free download available in all English-speaking countries, except for South Africa. I don't think it's available in South Africa yet. And, that the goal was to put some tools in the palm of a student's hand, literally, because that's where their phone is. It's in their hand. And you can see their reflexes. I had one student who, he was dealing with a lot of different issues, and he fell asleep in class last week, and as I walked by, I said, you need to wake up. And he like startled, but the first thing he did was grabbed his phone and looked at his phone. Before he was asleep, but he grabbed his phone and like looked at his phone in order to wake up. And it was just that moment of unconscious reflex that the phone is the orienting principle rather than connection to the people around him or the class or the environment or his body. It was like the phone, not, oh, where am I? But getting the app developed, at least the first version, we have a lot more we're anxious to build out in it. I'd like this because the app is very multidimensional. It's mindfulness. It's not a replacement. It's not a teen version of Headspace. I think Headspace is great, but this is also, there's a lot of learning to it. And there's a lot of mental health components that specifically address teen issues. like you were describing, can you imagine if this could scale, what this could be?
Amy, that just brings up an interesting question for me in terms of how did you evolve to that thinking from, sort of just person to person instruction to even incorporating an app or digital technology into the process?
That's a great question. I was actually very resistant to bringing technology in. I learned mindfulness myself from a book. And then when I found real live teachers, that was what I was hungry for. And I started experimenting with mindfulness when I was a sophomore in high school. So I was the same age as these students. It was a long time ago, but I was their age. And that was when I was looking for something, life just wasn't adding up. It wasn't enough, getting good grades, doing well, competing to go to college. That was all fine. And I was a very good student. But in terms of finding real answers to what am I here for? What's my potential? What am I going to do with my life? Not just what profession, but existentially, how am I going to be in this world? What's this gift of life going to do? And so I felt when I designed the program and wrote the curriculum that the most important thing was the transmission, the quality of our instructors and their relationship with the students. They needed to have their own mindfulness practice. It needed to be deep. They needed to have done inquiry. They needed to have clocked those hours of understanding their mind and really cultivating a state of inquiry and awareness and complexity and subtlety. And that's what I felt needed to be present in the classroom so that students could see, oh, there are dimensions to being a human being. It's not just that my history teacher teaches me these facts and I memorize them and now I can just look them up on Google and do I really need a teacher? You want them to be challenged in that interaction and relationship. And I also feel that, so many of our students in Philadelphia, because it depends on who categorizes it, but some people categorize it as 100% or something around 82% of the students we teach come from families of poverty. And that is an income of $24,000 a year for a family of four, $6,000 for one person for an entire year for all your needs in a first world country. If we were living in Bangladesh, $6,000 would go a long way. We're not, we're living in Philadelphia. So when you are dealing with those kinds of economic hardships, all kinds of things also are compounded. And many of these students don't have ends of a stable adult presence. They'll have a caretaker or a parent who's working 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. They're not around. They can't be there. They're trying to scrape together enough just to keep the family going. There's issues with mass incarceration and broken families and drug addiction. And, so many students don't experience enough stable adult presence. And maybe they have a solid family and a loving, caring family, but poverty pulls in so many ways. It's not a question of values. It's a question of pressure, economic and social pressures. So I really felt that the quality of our instructors was really important. They had to be able to be present and they had to be both hands off because we're in a classroom, we're in a school, we're not therapists, we're not foster parents. We're just there to put tools in their hands and give them the sense that we trust their potential. And you can't replace that. At the same time, our program, we pushed hard with the school district to let us in a full period a week for 12 consecutive weeks. So it's it's not quite 12 hours. I mean, a period is 47 minutes, but it's give or take, 12 hours of class time. And when they're high school students, they have all kinds of minute by minute requirements that they have to log in order to graduate. We couldn't get more than 3 months. But mindfulness is a lifelong habit. We're talking about how we train our brains. We're talking about how we relate to the world around us, how we question our conclusions, how we, whether we're aware that our thoughts are habitual and they come and go, and how much credence are we putting in the random things that pop through our mind. Oh, we get a random negative thought and then we go down in the dumps. We get a random positive thought and we're full of ego. We're completely arrogant. Why? Just because we had a thought. Is it based on anything? Is it objective? Is it true? So that takes time, takes years to really develop this. And the only way to stay in touch with the students is through technology. High school kids don't email. You can't stay in touch with them by email. And because they're under 18, of course, there are all kinds of, positive protective rules that we teach in the classroom, but we don't communicate with them outside of the school space. So the app is the way to do it, is to get on their phone. They can keep, we can send push notifications, reminding them and encouraging them. And we can see how they're using it.
So when you designed this app, I have to imagine you weren't thinking about a pandemic and people having to really learn remotely and not even be able to come into school. So how's the use of this technology been impacted in supporting the students as they return to school after a year of remote learning?
Well, it's early days. We have about 500 students on the app now. My goal by the end of this year is to have 5,000. And, by the end of next year, maybe 25,000. So I see this growing incrementally, but it's going to take, it's going to take time. Teens are interesting. They're very precious about their phones, and they don't just put anything on there. Candy Crush can go on there. But if you're a new, they're inviting you into their lives, and you have to convince them. So it's a meet and greet thing. It's going to kick over at a certain point, I'm sure, but early days are early days. And we're seeing steady use. So the students who were early adopters, the app went live the end of April. So it was the end of the school year last year. It was in development for about 15 months before it went live. But what we saw is with the early adopters, their usage went up when they went back to school.
Mm.
I'm not exactly sure how it's going right now, because now they're in class, and a lot of those students who are on the app are also getting live instruction. So I'm not exactly sure. I know that the usage has remained steady. It's growing over time. So in hard numbers, there's more usage now than there was before. In terms of frequency per person, it may be around the same. But what's going to be interesting, I feel, is when the program ends, are they staying with the app? Are they turning to the app for continuity because they don't have that classroom instruction?
Mm.
We're doing a lot of outreach right now. We're doing outreach. We're in 70 classes a week, so we're doing outreach in those classes. We're doing outreach to youth groups. We're doing outreach within the schools. We have two of my instructors who write the push notifications. I developed all the content with another instructor, but these two do all the communication. And so they're really ratcheting up their outreach, and one of them happens to play in a band, so she's got a little bit of like street cred.
Nice, nice. So Amy, if you were to just think about a year ago, before the app even existed, and now, are there any breakthroughs in learning that you're observing or the data is
Well,
teaching?
one of the things that because we do research on our program every year, and we have a researcher out of Syracuse University, and we've gone through all the hard work of, an institutional review board approval and school district approval. So we really value third-party analysis of the impact, because there are some things from the students I'd love to share, but I can tell you anecdotally how great it is. But we saw positive changes in well-being metrics during the pandemic when we were meeting with kids virtually. And that surprised me. We didn't have a control group. So if we had had a control group, I'm very curious at how far down they went. So the fact that our students improved on certain metrics related to self-care, self-compassion, optimism, and a sense of perseverance, that to me means a lot, because all the data on adolescents during the pandemic does not look very good on those metrics. We didn't have a control group. So that the learning for me is that this works better than I might have thought. That it has, because I keep thinking, we need to be with them more. We need to be with them longer. We need to give them more. We need to be more available. It needs to be in the classroom, out of the classroom, on technology, informally, that it needs to be more ubiquitous. But what I'm seeing is that when we're able to reach them, it has an impact, which means that it doesn't take that much to help teens through these hard times. And to me, that's the biggest takeaway through the pandemic is, everyone gets so discouraged and it feels like it's such an uphill battle. But with a little bit of support, teaching them tools they can do on their own, when they have the sense that they're not lost, it changes everything. And we can't lose sight of that, that with the sense of, mounting data that shows concerns, we have to recognize that people want to thrive. And when you give them something that is authentic, that develops care and steadiness and objectivity and optimism, that's realistic, it's not fake, but a sense of human potential and capacity and possibility, it uplifts the human spirit. So we can do a lot for these kids and an adult and their teachers as well.
So where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Well, that might be a question I want to turn around to you. What can we do with technology? Like, how far can we go? And what's like, we have the beta versions. What does scale look like in this very personal world of mental well-being and human potential?
Well, I guess one way for me to answer that is that, the potential is almost endless. When I think of the app in its current version, it's an app that you're downloading to your phone from the store, and it's still a client app, right? But now with the cloud and with more social type of features, youth are often disenfranchised in their communities.
Yeah.
And, they can feel like they have little voice.
Mhm.
But this can make you feel connected. It can offer a sense of community and care that the world, in some respects, is longing for.
Yeah.
Certainly, in urban communities, it's even more challenging. So it's been exacerbated or highlighted by the pandemic, which in a sense has forced people to have to be at home, but other circumstances already existed, like violence in a community
Mhm.
that leads to isolation. And this app not only can have the potential to create a new type of community, a mindfulness community, a caring community that didn't exist before. And it can empower the youth. And certainly, technology in and of itself can create good jobs, right? So, just the fact that, if you think of young generations, they're growing up as you described with the phone as an extension to everything they do. So they're learning technology at a pace that is mind-boggling. So if they can learn practices empowered by technology that lead to moods of love and care and connectedness, well, imagine the possibilities here to be able to communicate with mentors, and as well as just by default, a way of being that creates job skills that the world's yearning for, while you're empowering yourself with just the skills to be able to navigate the future through new sensibilities. So the possibilities are there, and technology is sort of applied in the right way can create a whole new environment. I think of you, Amy, and the experiences that you've had learning about mindfulness by traveling all over the world. Not every kid in Philadelphia is going to have that opportunity. But the more they can be explored, those sort of pluralistic experiences, the more they're open to possibilities and can begin to consider all kinds of different ways of thinking and not be limited to, being privileged enough to be able to have the opportunity to travel abroad. They can do it right now, and it can stimulate their imagination, hope in the midst of whatever's happening in their backyard.
Right. No, absolutely. I love what you're bringing together, about the use of technology, the jobs that come out of technology. We had 17 beta testers from the high schools, and they were really good. They were incredibly thorough. They need teens are teens. They need a lot of guidance. But you could see that they were being exposed to, oh, I could go into QA, I could go into testing, I could go into coding if I wanted, I could go into user interface. I could, those are big words or big skills, but I'm doing it. I already do this anyway when I'm complaining about an app that I don't like and that it doesn't work. And why don't they have, night mode? And why did they put that button there? That's so stupid. You can't find it. But these are actual jobs. So it opens up a world of possibility, and and with the kind of online contract market, students in the inner city can work anywhere, and they have access to jobs in a way they didn't used to have access to. And I want to career development isn't part of what we do, but I see it as a logical extension. You open your mind up to all these opportunities, and then you realize, oh, it's just people doing these things. They weren't special people inherently. They just started doing these things, and I could maybe do them too. And that's not, the schools that I see are almost, not all of them, but most of them are so sadly under-resourced. Only 6% of the schools in Philadelphia have a working library.
Wow.
I read that recently. It's a recent stat. It's from the last month. And the second year I was doing the program, I was in a high school in North Philly, which was a magnet high school, which focused on peace and social justice. And we met in the library. There were no books in the library. There were some empty shelves with a couple of books kind of. And when I grew up, that was my home, when I was, having teen angst and hating the world around me and wanting to be old enough so I could go off somewhere. I went to the library. That's where I went. And that's where I got exposed, where I could just, and the internet isn't the same thing as a working library, and it just was a sign of neglect and lack of opportunity. Lord knows, we could easily source the books for the library. It's, they cut the positions for a librarian, and in the schools that have libraries and reading hours, you feel that sense of openness and creativity. So when you were connecting the app to jobs, to possibility, to other ways of being, I feel like that is an indirect mission of inner strength, because when you're letting go of fixed ways of seeing and you're exploring systems where you're looking at large scale evolutionary development of the brain or cultural change and the levers of culture and how they change our personal experience. When you start looking at the world in that way, you start realizing that there are different possibilities. So that openness of thinking is a big part of what we're trying to teach. And maybe as we expand, we can add more components that either relate to the job world or relate to travel or relate to creating bridges. Because when you grow up in under-resourced communities, you're just not exposed to the options. You don't know they exist.
Yeah. What you're provoking in me, Amy, is that old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. And, I think of that means that the entire community of people interact with the children for those children to grow in a safe and healthy environment.
Right.
And technology is sort of like the plumbing that can enable that village again in a new way, in a more expansive way, because there's a lack of resources sometimes, but then there's Google. there's information, and there's a global community that we all need mentors. We all need connection. And if we can create that connection, and I think technology makes that possible, and we can engage care into that conversation, then the possibilities are just endless if we're mindful.
Right. So how do you curate deep conversation in technology? Because technology can facilitate that, but it tends to facilitate very superficial and acrimonious interaction. How do you build in deep because I know you love deep conversation.
Well, when I think about any conversation, there's levels of trust.
Mm.
And, there's a mood behind that. And, we can have a mood where there's fear and the hiding. We can be polite and conflict avoidance. And that's all really an indication of a low level of trust. But you see that in social media, technology. But then we can move from that mood of fear, if you cultivate it, if we're self-aware, which is sort of what the practices of mindfulness are cultivating, is an awareness of what is this mood that we're in, and is this serving me well? And we can start building trust and moving from avoiding to maybe the next level of trust, which might still not be where we need to be, because we might be in a mood of certainty now, where you're right, I'm wrong, it's win, lose, I attack, you defend. But if I'm aware of that, I can cultivate more trust and move from that debating to openness, exploring, curiosity, shared concerns, discovery. And that happens when you foster the right type of community. And ultimately, partnering and belonging, shared commitments and care. And technology can be applied with that self-awareness. That's where we want to be, at a level of trust, of belonging, of shared care, your cares and my care, win-win friendships, compassion. And that partnering has to get cultivated, though. And I think it starts really with the practices of mindfulness, because you're practicing that self-awareness on yourself of what is the mood that I'm in? And is this mood restrictive? Is it serving me well? And are there practices, just breathing, that could get me to reflect on those assessments that I'm holding, that I'm finding myself in these restrictive moods, to embrace expansive moods with assessments where there's hope and possibilities. And as I begin to practice that myself and then engage in a community of practice of mindfulness, then I can begin to become aware that trust is something that I can be purposeful about cultivating, and aware that, we don't have trust. That's why we're debating. We don't have trust. You're just being polite. And we can begin to be purposeful about moving towards openness, exploring, and partnering. And so it's not just words, it requires an embodiment. And that's what I think you're teaching and helping us all to learn.
I'm very interested in the intersection of technology with this, because my process was very labor intensive.
Yes.
So, my experience of cultivating those sensitivities came from many 10,000 hours of silent practice, dialogue practice, reflection, creating community. And when I think about being able to do this online, and I'm only just beginning to get exposed to the streaming world and all of its downfalls, but also some potential possibility is, can we, and I think about the teens, because if we could find a way to use technology that would learn also how to keep those norms, obviously it has to do with self-reflection. So technology, you have to inquire and engage with yourself and question your thinking and your responses and be able to look at the interaction. All of that is what helps us deepen and particularly, cultivating the ability to be still and let things be as they are and let go and allow oneself to rest so that one can see clearly, let all the dust settle and then you can see clearly without moving and be able to sit through the storms of emotions in the mind. And that takes practice. But if we're building community, because one of the big things you mentioned earlier was social media bullying. Bullying online it's catastrophic for youth, because how you are when you're a preteen or early teens and somebody says just that one insult and you can never get it out of your mind again.
Yes.
And so if we can build online communities in the way you're describing, where the technology also learns to monitor, to question, like not to control, but to seed inquiry, that would be a big evolution beyond where our app is. Our app is basically the in-person learning, made into audios and text-based stuff with photos and activities and leaderboards and games, but it really is not that much different than our traditional teaching. But if we could, so if a conversation is stuck or a stream is stuck, then the app learns how to seed questions into it that provoke deeper, more compassionate self-inquiry, group inquiry, helps people back off. That would be really outrageous. I mean, that would be phenomenal if we could figure out how to do that. Do you think that's possible?
It's more than possible. But a journey of 1,000 steps begins with one small step. And I think you've made the first step because there is an app. And now you can begin to take baby steps along that journey. And if I go back to the XPrize and I use that as sort of, as Stephen Covey used to say, begin with the end in mind, that the possibilities are there, well, then I can begin to work one step at a time down that path. But the path is one where we can begin to have role models. You can have avatars or people in that community that are learning.
Mm-hmm.
So all the pieces exist, like artificial intelligence. It's already there, and you've played with that in your car, right? Your car's like, there's a better path available, or you use technology today when you go to Amazon and the system's like, I see you're buying this. Well, those same learning processes can be applied to help you to learn and facilitate learning behaviors that serve you well. And I think a missing conversation in education sometimes can be our Cartesian way of thinking about education.
Absolutely.
And we forget play is huge. But if I can make this fun and we could play and learn how to be a community, how to learn how to work effectively as teams, and how to deal with unexpected things, contingencies that may emerge in positive ways, so that I'm navigating uncertainty with wisdom, with serenity. But I'm embracing that there's things that may happen, and the system can facilitate that and learn with me. And that's all there already. It's just adding those little pieces, walking down that path, and you're already on the journey. But if the XPrize shows you anything, it's not a movie anymore.
This is really exciting. I actually hadn't thought about this before, but this is really exciting. Because just building an app that kind of does what other apps do, it's like, it's good. We need to do this, and the students need to benefit from it, and we need to get it everywhere, because there are too many mental health issues that just need a little addressing. I don't want to leave those teens alone at night with nothing to do but, play violent video games, or, when they're alone and confused. But the idea of creating a more intelligent community through the technology, where the values of depth, awareness, profound sensitivity, self-inquiry, questioning fixed ideas, supporting each other's higher potentials, being able to intuit when somebody is about to break through and help them grow rather than shut them down. All of those things that come, when you're in group inquiry, that's very that with a group of people who are very sensitive, extraordinary things can happen. I mean, you can facilitate somebody's transformation in just really profound ways, by asking a question at the right moment, or staying silent at the right moment. And those breakthroughs become collective knowing. So you start becoming sensitive to the noosphere, sensitive to the container of consciousness, to that wisdom that wants to emerge. And when you're looking at teens who are looking for their self-identity in a world that looks very hostile, because the Middle Ages weren't any great shakes either. I mean, it was rough times then. But we're being presented with a lot of images of hostility. If you just turn on the news, it's so unpleasant. You're not really getting news. You're just getting unpleasantness. You could be learning in a different way. So if we can, it's hard for teens, but if we can create a community that is really about fostering, our wisdom and, unlimited potential for growth and care, and use technology to seed the questions to help, move to the side, move out of the way, the aggression, the mistrust, the bullying, the harshness, just the ways that people have been socialized, if we can, I mean, that would be really quite a breakthrough, because teens are wired to connect. The teen brain is wired to bond with their peers. It's an evolutionary necessity. When our early, human, evolution, our parents' generation was going to die out when we were teenagers. They were going to live that much longer. We needed our social peer group to survive. So they're wired to do that. Technology can connect. And then if we could start envisioning a learning community around these values that arise with systems thinking and meditation, and then you feel like, oh, we could be doing something really powerful.
Amy, that's why I'm excited about being a part of this inner strength community. And if there's one thing I learned from this XPrize avatar contest was that what Peter Diamandis' vision was not for a bunch of teams to get together to compete so that one could emerge as a winner. He's creating a community. And the whole time we were down there, 30 teams were there from around the world, and they were encouraging us to partner up with each other, get together with each other, learn from this team in Germany and this team in Russia and this team in Japan, and stay a community, because it's the best ideas all coming together that are going to bring this future, not a winner. So if I apply that to creating a learning community right here in Philadelphia, it's the greatest minds all over the world are thinking about pieces of this. I'm currently in this learning process of how to work effectively as a team with a shared friend of ours, Fernando Flores, who's a mentor of mine. Well, we're learning how to work as teams by immersing ourselves in World of Warcraft. Now, I don't know anything about that game. There's probably some teens in the high school that could teach me a little bit about how to navigate that. But the fact that I don't know how to play the game is part of the learning process, because I'm dependent on other people in the game that I'm just meeting for the first time somewhere in the other part of the world, but maybe that person's a little more game aware. And so they're helping me to learn, but we're all going on these quests and we don't know what to expect. So we're learning how to trust each other, how to leverage each other's strengths, how to come together as a team. And of course, if we don't have these conversations, bad things happen during the game. But my body doesn't know that this is a game.
Right.
And we're learning how to have effective conversations. We're learning how to work as a team. We're learning how to conquer challenges that as an individual we could never do, but we're better together. And all of this is because we're playing a game, but it's a serious conversation about how do we really work in the real world to be
right.
effective. Well, that applies right here with the Inner Strength community. We can build on what it is that you've begun and invite like-minded people from all over the world to be a part of this thinking, whether that's SAP, Google, or other people who are practicing other forms of learning, a Buddhist community that may have values that are not just how do I win, values that we could learn from. And all of that gets simulated in the game. It's exciting.
I'm excited about this, actually. I have some, yes, there's going to be some interesting things to pursue. I see Madison popping back in. I'm wondering if she is thinking now might be a good time for a short break.
Yes, I'm sorry to cut you both off. This is very energizing conversation, but I do want to respect our offer to everyone to take a break. So we'll come back in a few minutes. Please grab some water or stretch or rest your eyes. There will be some slides playing for the next few minutes, and then we'll come back for the Q&A portion. So if anyone still has questions, you can throw them in the chat or use the Q&A tool. And we'll see you in a few minutes.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back. All right, so I'm gonna share some of our attendees' questions with you both. Are you ready?
We are ready.
Okay. So the first one is, can you each speak to your own mindfulness practice and how it's helped you see or access your own transformative potential?
Tony, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So I have a practice of really naming my mood every day, 3 times a day. And it helps me to name the mood. So when I wake up in the morning, I just ask myself, am I in a mood of anxiety or cynicism, or am I in a mood of inquiry or gratitude? And when I find myself in a mood that's restrictive, I reflect on it and try to think about what are the assessments that I'm holding that has me in that mood. And just that awareness helps me to recognize that they're just assessments. And I can begin to embrace a more expansive mood of serenity, or wonder. And that is a practice that I do throughout the day. And I actually have an app for it to remind me what is my mood. And that triggers me taking a breath, reflecting on what mood am I in and what assessments am I holding, and is this mood serving me well? So I practice it all the time so it becomes a habit.
I love that. That's great. I think my favorite go-to and something I do every day is I spend time in silent meditation, letting everything be as it is, letting go, and just being still and just accessing that field of awareness. It's just slipping beneath the ripples on the surface of being. It's my enjoyment time. It's like that time of just pure enjoyment, just to let go, just to be, just to sit. Yeah, it's just pure enjoyment. And it also just also always reminds me of that presence of that well of being, and that well of goodness doesn't go anywhere, even when I walk out on the streets and see signs of suffering and decay and concern, and that well of goodness is also present. And so that gives me strength, it gives me fortitude, and it also in some way gives me a positive buffer, because when you are around a lot of suffering, we need to keep fueling ourselves, otherwise we're not going to be much help. People need hope and optimism that's authentic. So the letting go for me is that's also what has always pulled me. But I don't do as much. I only sit about half an hour a day. A lot of my day is sort of reflective, and I have touch points when I go out and walk, and I'll just look at the clouds as I'm walking, just to have some space. And so I don't have the luxury of having a lot of time, but fortunately, when I spent years of my life where I did have a lot of time to devote to practice, so I feel like it's always there. But I was fortunate and compelled. I didn't really have a choice. I kept trying to do other things, but I always ended up going back and doing longer retreats. So that's always there as a touch point for me. And I encourage people. I think people should give themselves the luxury of spending time in contemplation, whatever form of contemplation you like, but really creating the space for it. And sometimes it means going away from our usual environment, because we're so habituated. Even when we don't need to be busy, we're habituated to filling our time. And I really do encourage people to dedicate some time to inquiry.
Amy, do you have any 1-minute practices, like just breathing and noticing your tension, and that when you don't have time?
I mean, for most people, I do recommend using the breath. I think it's a great anchor. And focusing on the exhalation, a slightly longer exhalation can create a sense of release. Grounding with the body, noticing just where your hands have contact, where your feet have contact, noticing your weight on the chair, those tactile touch points and just resting in the sensation, that can really help bring stability. So like if you're on stage having stage fright, the best thing to do is press your toes into the stage and just notice just like the small movements of your feet, and allow your breath to deepen and your belly to soften. But just notice you're standing on the ground, gravity's holding you down. Gravity's this huge force. You're stuck to the earth. You're okay. You're solid. You're there. Those are a couple good ones.
I
Amazing.
love
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for sharing, both of you. So we have a few different questions for Tony, and I think they're pretty related. So I'm going to just list them off together. What first drew you to inner strength? What do you see inner strength doing particularly well? And what are you hoping to catalyze through your involvement?
What first drew me to inner strength was just listening to Amy's stories. And I had the opportunity just a few years ago to hear Amy talk about what inner strength was trying to do. And at that stage, it was still growing. It was smaller in scope than it is today. But already she was sharing how a lot of the issues that teens are facing, like depression and anxiety, were being addressed. And that really resonated with me, especially because I have a heart for the urban community. And as an African American, I'm very aware of the challenges in the inner cities. And that practice just resonated with me, and I wanted to help. And I'm also an active coach on staff at Villanova, and I felt that I could help bring other mentors, student athletes that the high school students could look up to, that they could relate to, and they could help each other to develop practices of mindfulness, as well as the staff and administration at Villanova. We're trying to create now a program which we're calling Villanova on Purpose. And its purpose is to adopt the inner city through inner strength and begin to look at comparative effectiveness studies that Amy hasn't had a chance to do, as she described, and bring mental health professionals from our College of Nursing and technology professionals from our College of Engineering and innovation thinking to the same conversation so that we could help, which is part of Villanova's Unitas, Veritas, Caritas goals and objectives. So it resonated on many levels, and we're partnering.
Great. The next question that we have is for you, Amy. What are some tangible goals that you have for inner strength this year, and what are you most focused on?
I'm most focused on really reaching the kids that we're working with. But at the same time, I'm most focused on that. And I'm also very urgent about reaching a lot more schools and working with the teachers and introducing them to the app. And we have these beautiful Explore and Restore slide decks, which are designed for classroom teachers without mindfulness experience to use with the students. They come with audios, some have videos. So I actually was just in touch with the school district yesterday. They reached out and they said, we feel that your tools are underutilized. And so I'm working with them to we're creating an outreach program for all of the schools right now. So we're doing a series of videos. I'm probably going to do a series of in-person trainings in the schools. So right now, I'm very focused on individual classrooms. I'm getting beautiful responses. I usually teach, I don't know, around 7 or 8 classes a week, but this semester I'm only teaching one, but I'm involved with the other 70 and our instructors and sitting in on their classes. But my one class, they're doing amazing, and their teacher makes them do homework every week for the class, which, so I get to read their essays every week. And the one student, after 2 classes, just 2, was talking about the difference between the homework assignment was, what's the difference between thoughts and awareness? And this is not something I taught them in class, but she said when she was observing, she felt like thoughts come and go, and they're not real because they arise and pass away, and you can change what you think. But awareness, for her, this is what she said, it's not what I told her. She said that awareness is real because it's a constant. We're always aware. So if a high school student, after 2 45-minute classes, can be talking about the subtlety of the arising and passing away of thought and some quality of human consciousness that's present throughout that, that's really mind-blowing. And the same class, one of her classmates wrote to me for his homework assignment. The first week was what's on your, where does thought trip you up? And he wrote to me, he said earlier, the week before, his friend got shot walking home from school because he was hanging out with the wrong kids. And he's had 3 surgeries, and he opened his eyes that day for the first time. And he said, I'm very distressed and my thoughts are really bothering me. This is one classroom, 2 classes. You have this vast chasm of polar opposite experience of the distress that no adult can deal with well, let alone a teenager. And then you have this capacity for subtle inquiry into the nature of human thought and consciousness, all going on in this North Philly high school. And, when I was reading the homework and writing comments to them, I thought, I just felt so urgent to be reaching as many kids as possible and communicating with them and supporting them and getting them to be able to access resources, think about, pursue positive strength, because both extremes of that one classroom both need that same type of encouragement to go deep. So I feel very urgent about that. And at the same time, I feel very urgent about spreading the tools that we've already created that are digital to all the schools, because they're there and the teachers are struggling. And I'm also very excited about the future, and taking the next step. So what we were talking about earlier, of really leaning into what can be a real culture changer. Because when I started this, I wanted to change the culture of Philadelphia. I wanted to improve outcomes over time. I thought, okay, in 10 years, if we reach a significant percentage of students every year, in 10 years, we should be seeing a different outcome. better entry-level managers, better employees, better spouses, better parents, but if we can teach the positive aspects of community building at a larger scale with technology, and using technology, but using these human skills, we could do even more. So I'm a little bit overwhelmed and a little excited. So those are the three things I feel very urgent about this year.
Great. I think we might only have time for one more question, and so I wanted to make sure we get to this one. Is there something that each of you can share with everyone about what keeps you feeling inspired every day?
I'll start, just because it's a simple answer: care. And I would quote from Martin Luther King, where he said, "In Where Do We Go From Here?" that love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. And that inspires me, that if we can begin to love each other, care for each other, and be mindful, the possibilities are endless.
Well, I would absolutely echo that. I feel the same, that it's the sense of the goodness, the profound love, the deep love that is I feel is part of the fabric of life. And so that gives me joy, and it gives me capacity and inspiration, and a sense of rootedness, so that I would echo what Tony said.
Well, thank you both so much. This was an incredible conversation, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. We'll see you next time. We'll be having more events like this coming up, and these are some ways that you can stay involved until then. Amy, do you want to have any closing words?
No, thank you. Thank you for hosting, Madison, and Tony, thank you always. I'm more inspired and excited about what's possible, and very moved. So thank you. And for all our supporters, I consider you part of the family. So we have a big extended Inner Strength family, and you're always welcome to connect and stay in touch, offer suggestions. Yeah, so don't be a stranger.
I feel the same. I'm grateful for this conversation. So thank you.
Great. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.